Welcome, and so glad you could be with us. And I will go ahead and get started with our bracha. Baruch Ata Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam Asher Kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
And here we go with Parshat Nitzavim, and these concluding parshiot. Right, we have Nitzavim, Vayelech, Ha'azinu, and Bracha, and they're all short. They're all short because there's not a lot of Deuteronomy left, and the question is asked: how come we divide things in such a way that we have all these short Torah portions? And the answer is because we want to get done with the curses of Ki Tavo before the new year starts. You don't want to start the new year with all these curses that are mentioned in the previous parsha. That's one traditional explanation, and I'm sure it's not just an explanation. I think it's the reason. The other unrelated point is that I would always think about my father, my late father, when we do this parsha, because it was very near and dear to him. He loved this parsha. He used to love and talking about it, and the first Rashi that we're going to do, he loved to quote it, and so I was thinking of doing this in his memory, the Ilui Nishmato, and coincidentally then in the memory of my mother, who probably um, pricked my curiosity regarding the Bible because she used to read me Bible stories when I was a tiny little kid, and that got me interested in being curious about what the Bible really said. And so I have to thank them with all my heart for leading me into the path that they led me, the journey. So, Le'ilui Nishmat Harav Meir ben um, Moshe Ruvain, Shulamit Bat Mordechai Vedvora. Okay. Atem Nitzavim Hayom Kulchem. Atem Nitzavim. You are standing. Hayom, today, Kulchem, all of you. Lifnei Hashem Elokechem, before the Lord your God. Rashechem, your heads. Shiftechem, your tribes. Ziknechem, your elders. Veshotrechem, and your officers. Kol Ish, let's see if I can. Yisrael, every man of Israel. And we'll take a look at the Rashi here. Atem Nitzavim. By the way, the list doesn't end there. It just ends, the sentence ends, but the list will continue, as you will see. You are Atem Nitzavim, you are standing. Melamed, this teaches us, Shehichnisam Moshe Lifnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that Moses gathered them before the Holy One, blessed be He, B'yom Moto, on the day of his death, on the day of his passing, Lahachnisam Bivrit, to draw them into a covenant. Lahachnis means to bring in, right? Draw them into a covenant. So Rashechem, your heads, Shiftechem, your tribes. So it doesn't make a lot of sense, and Rashi simply says it's a way of speaking. It's a grammatical issue. Rashechem l'Shiftechem. That is the heads of your tribes, the heads of your tribes. Zichnechem v'shotrechem, your elders and your officers. Hachashuv, chashuv kodem. The more important takes precedence in the list. Okay, v'achar kach kol ish Yisrael, and then at the end of that, every Israelite, every man in Israel. Moving on. So, tapchem, your children, neshechem, your wives, v'gercha, and this your stranger, your proselyte, your non-Israelite, right? Asher bekerev machanecha, who is in the midst of your camp. Mechotev eitzecha, from your hewers of wood, ad she'ev meimecha, to your drawers of water. So if you think about it, of course, being a wood chopper in this sense, we're talking not here about a lumberjack. We're talking about somebody who's breaking up logs for kindling and preparing a fire and drawing water. I mean, how indoor plumbing has just transformed the world for us, where you don't have to walk to a well to get the water that you need for the day, and how many times you'd have to do that, and how heavy water is. You know how heavy water is, and these are such humble, humble tasks. So he's going all the way from the most important to people who have humble tasks. But they're all included. So this is very interesting, by the way. This is something that unless you've read this Rashi, you would not know this. So
How come? How come the strangers are included in the covenant? They're
because
not Jewish.
yes, but what's happened is, so we understand, as you know, the rabbis understand the term ger to mean a proselyte, a convert. And there were different, the point was that it says bekerev machanecha. In other words, these are people who have cast their lot with the Jewish people.
Oh.
Okay. So, mechote veitzecha, hewers of wood. And this is from the Tanchuma. It's a Agadic midrash, also extant, by the way. Melamed. This tells us Sheba'u Knaanim, that Canaanites, right? Exclamation point. Canaanites came lehit gayer, to convert, to cast their lot with the Jewish people, b'imei Moshe, during the days of Moses, kederech sheba'u giv'onim b'imei Yoshua, just as the Gibeonites came during the days of Joshua. Now, the story of the Gibeonites is explicitly told. If you read the book of Joshua, you'll read about this, right? And what they did was they essentially tricked tricked Joshua into thinking they were from a distant country. And they intentionally did that. And Joshua was tricked, and then he found out that they were actually Canaanites, but he had given them his word. So we're being told that that the similar thing happened during the days of Moses. But what's interesting is that Rashi says Lahit Gayer, right? So whether Rashi is using the term Lahit Gayer here, normally Lahit Gayer means to convert, right, to Judaism. And perhaps Rashi is using the word here in a different sense, literally. Somehow to be accepted as strangers, I'm not sure. But it certainly sounds like they wanted to be converted. And it's going to raise an issue which I'm going to discuss with you in a moment. But let's keep going. V'zehu ha'amur begivonim. So we understand that when in Joshua chapter 9, that's where this happens, where it says regarding the Gibeonites, it says, V'ya'asu gam hema ba'orma. So this word gam means also. So in other words, they also did ba'orma, with trickery. Okay. So when it says also, that implies that there must have been someone else that had done the same kind of thing. And that's all we really have that gives us any support for this particular interpretation. But it is very suggestive. Unatanam Moshe, and Moses made, so going back to these Canaanites who showed up at Moses' doorway, so to speak, Moses made them chotvei eitzim. He made them hewers of wood, woodcutters, vishuavei mayim, and drawers of water. Now, that's of course the issue is, if Rashi means to convert, then why should they be, in a sense, penalized, right? That's the question that I'm asking myself. I want to stay with that interpretation, and I want to suggest that that the reason why is because they were had they not done it through trickery, right? Had they simply come and said to Moses, "We want to cast our lot with the Jewish people. We truly want to worship God, etc." This wouldn't have happened. But the punishment was, or the penalty was, for the trickery. And had they not practiced trickery, I don't think Moses would have made them hewers of wood and drawers of water. And to my mind, that's what's equitable about this arrangement. Because, of course, you know what was going to happen to Canaanites who did not cast their lot with the Jewish people. But that also says something else. It actually opens up an interesting issue, because all that we have primarily is willy-nilly. They're to perform genocide, basically, right? To destroy the Canaanites. And here it appears that were a Canaanite or were Canaanites to truly commit themselves to worshiping God and serving as serving as part of the Israelites, subsequently the Jewish people, they would not have been exterminated, or at least no attempt would have been made to do that. I realize it doesn't, it doesn't solve all the issues involved, but I think it does at least address a serious concern. So going on, let's make sure I have did everything there. Yes, I think everything I did do and cover everything there. Okay, going on. 11, verse 11. Le'ovracha bevrit Hashem Elokecha, to make you pass, or for you. I think better. I'm thinking of Rashi here. For you to pass, so that you may pass. There we go. It's not a hifil. It's not a causative. It's not make you pass. It means it's more so you may pass through the covenant or into the covenant or with the covenant of the Lord your God, uva'alato, and his curse. Asher Hashem Elokecha koret imcha hayom, which the Lord your God, literally it means cuts, right, with you today. So Rashi's going to explain this passage, some of the language here saying to allow you to pass through, or to use the term to cut a covenant. Why those words are being used.
What does the expression to cut a deal?
Yeah,
That sounds like the same, but
it does. Good point.
what does the verb cut mean?
Yeah. So are you saying?
Are you cutting it into a clay tablet, or?
Yeah, I mean
I don't understand what cut a deal could be.
What they did, I know. You know, I could play around with it and say like it's if you were to write out the contract, and cut it into wood or into stone, and maybe I'm going out on a limb here that like what it's trying. I know that the connotation of it is that it's a serious matter, that this is not something you can go back on, that your word has to be your bond here, and that cutting a deal in a sense, maybe in the English expression, has the idea of having it cutting stone, maybe. But the point though is that you can't go back on your word. That if you go back on your word, there will be penalties. Now Rashi, I just as soon do the Rashi first, and then we can discuss a little bit.
Oh, I Googled it.
Yes.
I Googled it, and it really, well, the first one comes up from Genesis 15 and cutting the animals in half.
Yes, and that's what where Rashi's going to take us.
Yeah, and I don't know, a couple of I haven't gone all the way through to see if there's anything else, but
okay.
But cutting in stone sounds good too.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it'll be interesting if I'm right, because I was going out. I was taking a semi-educated guess. Let's do the Rashi, because I don't want to keep you in suspense here. And Golda, you've already basically told us what's going on here, how Rashi explains it. So first of all, Rashi wants to clarify le'ovracha, because it says you, the cha at the end means you, right? To pass you. And so it sounds like to cause you to pass. But Rashi is going to clarify that he doesn't say that, okay? Lihiyotcha over bevrit, so that you may pass through the covenant, or pass into the covenant, right? Or pass in the covenant. And he goes on to make this grammatical note, and it is not possible, it's not appropriate to interpret it, to translate it, or explain it, kamo laha'avircha, right? Laha'avircha is the hifil form of the verb, and the hifil form is causative. So lovesh, for example, is to wear clothing. Lehalbish is to dress someone else. Okay, so that's the causative idea there, right? So he says you don't interpret this word as to cause you to pass, ela kamo, but rather la asotchem otam, for, and this is in chapter 4, right? For you to perform them. So
It's
so
like
that
a man and wife when they get married, their commitment to each other.
yeah,
It's the same way, you know what I mean? They vow to each other for life when they get married. They
and
commit.
yes, absolutely. And Harlan, as a matter of fact, that comparison, that metaphor has been used to describe the relationship of the Jewish people to God, and in fact, the Ma'amad Har Sinai, the moment at the of the Ten Commandments, has been described as the grand wedding between God and the Jewish people. So there's some very poignant stuff that's coming up here that I think Rashi explains beautifully. At any rate, he wants us to understand that it means to allow you to enter, right? To give you that opportunity to enter, right? Okay. La ovracha brevrit. So he goes into another explanation here of to allow you to enter or to give you the opportunity to enter the covenant. So he explains this use of language here. Derech ha'avara. He says the when you think about what do we mean by passing through, that's ha'avara, right? Kach hayu kortei ritot osim. He says this was the practice that people who were establishing covenants would do. Osim mechitza mikan, they would make a partition on the one side, umechitza mikan, and a partition on the other side, ve'ovrim benatayim, and they would pass between them. And that's okay, let me keep going. Kamosha Katuv, as is written, Jeremiah 34, Ha'egel, the calf, asher kartu lishnayim, which they cut into two, vaya'avru bein betarav, and they passed between the pieces. And that's likewise the reference, Golda, that you mentioned in Genesis 15, where God actually does this covenant with Abraham, and Abraham has this very deep dream as well. So first of all, he takes a calf and he cuts it in two, and then he has this vision, right, of this column of fire or smoke or something that passes between those two pieces. But that would be the cutting. In other words, cutting the calf in two. And I think the idea there is how, the level of concern that this is a matter of life and death, that this agreement is a matter of life and death. And that's why you have both the blessings and the curses. The curses also back up the seriousness of this particular agreement. And of course, you just have to do your own meditation as to how seriously we take our own words and how seriously we take our own commitments, etc., etc. And it's trying to heighten that, I'm going to keep going. Okay. All right. So these are very short. As you can see, these are very short Torah portions. Leman hakim otcha hayom lo la'am. In order to establish you today for him as a people, v'hu yeh lecha lelokim, and he will be to you a God, your Elokim, kasher diber lach, as he spoke to you, u'chasher, and as he nishba la'avotecha, he swore to your fathers, your patriarchs, la'Avraham, li'Yitzchak, u'le'Yaakov, to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So let's see.
He also said, God also said that those who are not with us this day, which he means the future people,
Yes.
also should observe the covenant.
Right. We'll get to that. My dad loved that verse, by the way. Yes. exactly. We aren't going to get to it today, but it's yes, absolutely. Right. So, excuse me 1 second. Excuse me, I'm sorry. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Leman hakimot hayom, right? So as to establish you today, lo la'am, as his people. I'm sorry. I had to sneeze, so I was trying to mute myself so you wouldn't have to hear that. Right. So here we go. Finding the place. Right. Kol kach hu nichnas litroach. The reason he's going to so much trouble, that is, God is going to so much trouble. Sorry again.
I, I don't know how Moses understood the future like he did, because he felt that there were going to be bad things happening to the Jewish people. He understood that the temple was going to be destroyed, and they're going to be made in another foreign country would take over, and they're going to be distributed throughout the nations. And how did he know all that? That was going to happen in the future.
I could give you two answers, Harlan. One is that he was inspired by God. God, of course, did know these things, and remember, he and God had an amazing relationship, a very unique relationship. So that's one answer. I can give you a less of a mystical answer, which is to say he understood human nature. He understood the nature of, he understood his choira. He understood his merchandise, and he knew how human beings behave. And yeah, so I don't want to start giving a sermon. It's very tempting, but what's so sad is that when people are successful and when people are prosperous, they aren't always appreciative.
Right.
Okay, and we have that verse that happened much earlier on in Deuteronomy, where he warns the Israelites that they should not say, "My power and the might of my hand have won for me all this, substance, etc." And if you ask yourself what's going on right now, that's exactly what's happening. People are less and less religious because they're not drawn. They don't feel a need to be drawn towards spiritual, practices in some ways, right? So, and anyway, let's get going. This is part of the tragedy, the human tragedy, as you might describe it, from a Jewish perspective. Just have a little bit more time, so let me do a little bit more, and then we will decide. Just to put a little marker here, and we'll start with Rashi tomorrow. So okay. So this is the degree to which that Moses is telling them. This is the degree to which God is going to trouble, going out of his way to establish you as his people. Ve'hu yeh lecha lelokim, and he will be to you or for you as a God. So that's the other side of the coin, right? Lefi shediber lecha v'nishba la'achvotecha, and because he spoke to you and he swore to your ancestors, shelo lahachlif et zaram be'uma acheret, that he would never exchange their seed for a different nation. Lachach hu oser etchem. This is the reason that he forbids you bishvuot, by means of oaths, right? Halalu, by these oaths. Shelo taknituhu, that you don't provoke him. Achar shehu eino yachol libadel michem. You don't provoke him, since he has also agreed that he will never separate himself from you. So God is stuck, and we are stuck, okay, when we enter this covenant. I mean, it's a very nice place to be stuck, but if we're not going to hold up our end of the bargain, God still has to, that doesn't get him off the hook. And that puts God in a very difficult situation, up to a point of provocation. So I'm going to stop here and put in a little arrow. And let's see where we are right here. Okay, right there. That's where we'll start tomorrow, God willing. And I'm going to stop the share and also stop the recording. And thank all those who joined us this morning. Thank you so much. Let me see where we are. Okay.